Chairman, I would like to extend greetings to the very balanced delegation of Ireland and also to the representatives of Irish civil society. I have a question to the Minister. In your country, is each person member of an NGO? Because given the large number of representatives who have come just on the subject of racial discrimination, it seems to me that there must be a lot of NGOs, and I'm convinced that that must be the case.
Most relative to the trans lobby is the greater NGO industry occurring in Ireland. Much like Quangos, NGOs have mushroomed in size to a staggering degree and variety for a spectrum of social and charitable causes and agendas, with an estimated 33,000 operating in the country with connections within the EU, can justifiably be described as an industry. There exists in Ireland an NGO class that have grown up alongside this mushrooming industry, with their own progressive, almost cult-like doctrines. Described elsewhere as a modern soft power, the NGO class and industry has a subtle but measurable effect on policy formation, otherwise described as the long hand of globalism in Ireland. Although some NGOs active in the country are generally involved in worthwhile and meaningful areas such as education and healthcare, others engage in what could rightly be described as more pernicious activities that involve pushing the envelope of progressive policies on immigration, the trans lobby, and other related social justice issues and affairs. In Ireland's case, these NGO sectors could justifiably be labelled the beating heart of liberalism and globalism. These NGOs are strategically placed to be in the driving seat of news and communication on daily matters concerning the areas of hate speech, racial inequality, and activism in the closing of direct provision centres. They could rightly be described as a biased confluence of media and activists, focused on a staunch set of extreme left-leaning policies, actively grooming and intentionally dictating the media narrative. The fact that NGOs in these areas, and leftist politics, have increasingly become comfortable bedfellows, due to shared ideologies and manifestos over recent years, is grounds to call for democratic interference in a number of areas and issues concerning immigration especially, with obvious lack of referendum and opposition voice being allowed, without ridicule. In Ireland's case, it is arguable with the collapse of the Catholic Church in recent decades, incidentally left behind a vacuum to be filled. As the Church declined in power and influence, a new class of social activism emerged from the country's academic institutions, specifically in the matters of marriage and abortion, of which the political classes and establishment was all too happy to endorse for popularity and votes, as well as many politicians having a personal and active interest in promoting and supporting also. As this leftist culture across politics and academia grew in size and scale over the years, so too did the pushing of more and more liberal and left-leaning agendas and issues be brought to the fore, first with contraception, then divorce, gay marriage, and of late trans and LGBTQ matters. Leftist ideology has taken such a foothold in Ireland of today that government are in full support of the leftist lobby, with all political parties jumping on the bandwagon, bar a few independent voices of opposition. The various issues of NGOs get unquestionable cooperation and financial support, with quick-fire and rubber-stamp-style legislation on such areas as contraception, abortion, transgenderism, and hate speech among the most prominent, getting unequivocal support and praise, almost to the point of cult-like status and non-questioning from political parties and ministers. One such NGO are the European Network Against Racism, a pan-European initiative with an Irish wing, who with full support of the left across Europe, push their agendas through education, as well as openly influencing elections with their ideologies, using both private and public funding to run campaigns through the mainstream media. An alliance of NGOs exists in Ireland called the Coalition Against Hate Crime in Ireland, who, like many of their ilk, are pushing for hate crime legislation only intended for one thing: the stamping out of opposition and dissident voices on immigration and other questionable social justice issues, such as trans ideology. Social media platforms, namely Meta, display bias in showing full support to these NGOs, while blocking and fact-checking opposing voices. In the example of the European Network Against Racism, Meta actively remove and ban any dissident speech under the banner of hate speech to their content. This NGO regularly received taxpayer-funded grants. For example, in 2017, they received just over €95,000 from the government, 3/4 of which came directly from the taxpayer by way of the Department of Housing and Local Government. Like dozens of its counterparts across the West, this NGO do the legwork of globalism in Ireland. NGOs such as these have been allowed to become integral to Irish news and broadcasting, as well as policy formation. This should ideally be a serious breach of impartiality. However, for those aware, the mainstream media in Ireland are hand in glove with the government, as they rely far too heavily on state support, as print and television media are in slow decline, and so kneel to the establishment's wishes, of which the NGO industry are a large part of. Those of NGO ranks stem from hard left activism, which over the years has become a profession and cultivated as having standing in civic society in Ireland and elsewhere, often used by many as a royal road to positions, power and status within the NGO sector as well as government, while anyone in personal, public or civic life with a mere interest or right-leaning view are ostracized and shunned and risk being sacked within these sectors. A large percentage, not surprisingly, of these leftists stem from academia, as NGOs outsource some of their costs to academic institutions, as well as state funding. One vital NGO watchdog recently shut down has been the website benefax.ie. This once extremely useful and often vital database on the Irish non-profit sector, for the public to gain an over-the-shoulder view into the bloated Irish NGO sector's finances and activities, was operational until 2022, having to cease operations due to the deliberate lack of staff and funding. Its closing down now leaves the NGO sector to complete anonymity, as nothing has risen to take its place, leaving less and less transparency over NGO political activity, their business activities and relations. The discontinuing of such a vital resource only proves further the suspicions and argument against certain NGOs and their activities, and as an act of corruption and injustice against democracy and government accountability, as the tax-paying public will continue to bear the brunt of their taxes funding these NGOs, but be given no ready accessible means to see where their hard-earned taxes are going, and what they are being spent on.